All right, guys, so the Madden 23 beta has been out for about 2 weeks now, and so right now I want to share with you all my thoughts about all the new features that EA is adding and let you know what I think is good, what I think is bad, what definitely needs to be changed before launch in August, and also what I think the meta is going to be this upcoming year for Madden 23. Now, unfortunately, EA has strict rules about not recording or streaming any beta footage, so the only footage I can show is from the trailer and from what other YouTubers have gotten EA's permission to post on their channels. So to start things off, I'm going to talk about several new features that EA has under this umbrella called Field Sense, and it's just a bunch of improvements that will hopefully make the gameplay a little bit more realistic. And so first up is Hit Everything, which is EA's attempt to have more realistic collisions and natural animations with the ball carriers and the tacklers, and so far I think that it looks pretty good. I think we're all pretty familiar with how in most Madden games you can get sucked into these weird tackle animations that look really unnatural, and eventually we see them so many times that we just get used to it, and that does still happen sometimes, but I will say that this year it definitely seems like with their animation branching technology or whatever they call it, that the animations are a lot smoother. You'll see second defenders come in and naturally drive the ball carrier back, and it doesn't look like he gets sucked into a canned animation nearly as often. So I would say the Hit Everything feature definitely seems like a step in the right direction. So overall, Hit Everything is definitely a positive from EA. Now, the second new feature under Field Sense is called 360-degree cuts, and this is the ability to use the left trigger or L2 to kind of plant your foot in the ground with the ball carrier and just make a really fast cut. Whereas like right now on next gen Madden, all your cuts are kind of rounded. Like there's not any real explosiveness with the cuts as far as I can tell, other than occasionally doing a little bit of fancy stick work with the right stick, like the Reaper stick, as some of you may be familiar with. So I think that the 360-degree cuts feature is really nice. I just think that it's going to have a really limited application where people will actually use it in a game. From what I can tell, the only time you'll truly want to use it is when you're running, say, a stretch play, and it looks like there's going to be a lot of defenders with outside leverage. This gives you the ability to kind of plant your foot and cut back inside, hopefully to an open running lane. But outside of those situations where you're doing a cutback right after a handoff, I don't really see the 360-degree cuts really having too much impact on how we're running with the ball. Like, I haven't really used it out in open field at all. I'm still trying to juke and spin. Even though they did tune back the spins a little bit, the spins are still decent enough that I'm using them right now in the beta. And I'm sure that as the full game comes out and we get practice mode, maybe people will figure out some really cool techniques on the right stick, combined with this 360-degree cuts feature. Just right now, I'm not really using it, and I don't see my opponents using it either. So again, a nice feature that EA added, but I don't think it's going to have a big impact overall on most of the gameplay. Now, the third thing EA advertised under Field Sense is wide receiver versus DB battles, and to be completely honest, I haven't noticed anything different. And they're talking about all these mechanics where you can press longer and you can fight through the press with your receiver. And so if you're a squads player, then maybe this will be much more applicable to you, because it looks like they have new mechanics kind of similar to like if you want to user rush, all the different directions you can move the stick to kind of do bull rush, swim move, things like that. It looks like now wide receivers and DBs have more of those controls as well. But if you're just a head-to-head player where you're gonna be playing just you versus your opponent, I don't think these are gonna really apply to you, other than maybe a couple new animations. But for the most part, I think that wide receiver DB interactions to me look largely unchanged from last year. Now, of course, the biggest new feature under this Field Sense umbrella is going to be the skill-based passing, which if you're here, hopefully you saw my video on my main channel, but I'll just reiterate that I think skill-based passing will change Madden forever. I just don't think it's perfect quite yet. I think that currently the moving of the reticle like to the edge of the shaded ellipse, it causes a lot of accuracy issues, and also pro players are reporting that it just seems to make the ball float. And one suspicion is that maybe if you have like a velocity ability, so like a gunslinger or a pass lead elite or a set beat lead, that when the skill-based passing is turned on, it might be disabling that velocity ability. So if it's just a bug that EA is going to fix, and when we get to August, you actually have better velocity on those players again, then maybe more more people will use the skill-based passing. But right now, if it feels like the ball is floating and it feels like we have crazy inaccuracy penalties, then people aren't going to use it. So we'll have to see how EA tunes the skill-based passing based on the beta feedback. I'm sure that they want people to use it, but my prediction is that Madden 24 will be the year where everybody starts using it because it will be far and away the best way to pass the ball. It's not going to be this year. I think it'll be next year. Now, the other umbrella for the big changes EA is bringing to Madden 23 is foundational football, and this is what I'm really excited about. The biggest changes are improvements to pass coverage, and for all of us who have been playing next-gen Madden 22 for the last 10 months, this is such great news. And for those of you who didn't play next-gen Madden 22, basically the zone logic in next-gen Madden 22 is probably one of the worst things I've ever seen in a Madden video game. It seemed like defenders were everywhere except where their zones were supposed to play. There were constant problems with zones going way too far inside. If you played deep halves in the end zone, literally both your deep halves would just end up in the dead center of the end zone. There were so many countless issues with zones in this game that was just like scratching the surface. And finally, EA Sports has fixed zones in Madden 23. Now, the zones aren't completely perfect. I have seen some issues where cloud flats are playing a little too shallow, and I have had some outside thirds seem to get a little bit too far inside for no reason. But overall, this is still a huge improvement over last year, and hopefully in the next 2 months, EA will continue tweaking the zones and making them even better, because at least since I've came back to Madden, so it's been about 4 years now since I started playing Madden again, these are by far the best zones that I have seen on a Madden football field. Now, at the same time, it is going to be an adjustment for all of us who have been playing Madden 22 next gen, because zones will actually guard routes so much better. Like, I have gotten in the habit of just throwing a crosser that's passing underneath a player in zone coverage, because in next gen Madden 22, that zone will completely ignore the crosser that's crossing right in front of his face. I threw one of those on the Madden 23 beta, and the zone actually ran with the crosser as he crossed in front of his face. On next-gen Madden 22, it would be an easy dot. On Madden 23, or at least on the beta, it was an interception, which it should be, but we're going to have to retrain ourselves to actually read zones properly, because Madden 22 has really built some bad habits into us. And so I think that when Madden 23 first comes out, a lot of us will probably be throwing a lot of interceptions, and it may take a few weeks or maybe even a few months to really adapt and really become more disciplined again, because we're going to have to return to making smart reads and smart throws and not just throwing anything and everything, because in Madden 22, that's what you could do and you could get away with it. Now, the other major change under this foundational football umbrella is improvements to the pass rush and the QB contains. And I tell you what, guys, it finally seems like QB contains might actually be working. Basically, EA wanted to get rid of the meta of players just snapping the ball and rolling outside the pocket, which, especially with escape artist in the game in Madden 22, was absolutely miserable to go up against. And in Madden 23, if you try that, you're probably gonna have a rough time. Number one, because escape artist is no longer in the game, and so obviously players like Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray can still get outside the pocket better than a slower quarterback. But if your opponent has a real pass rush, and especially if they're QB containing, then you're gonna have a really tough time. I'd say it's almost impossible to go around that edge rusher. Now, there are some ways that I've seen people trying where the contains might contain so well that you can actually do a rollout by going inside of the rusher, but I don't think that's going to be as effective as what we had this last year and in previous years of people being able to just roll around the edge rusher. And so be on the lookout for that. But without escape artist, I think it's going to be much easier to deal with on the defensive side of the ball than this year, where people would just escape artist around contains. They would fly right past QB spies. Clicking in on the right stick to send extra defenders wouldn't do anything. And so I don't think we're going to have nearly as many issues with scrambling quarterbacks this year, or at least people whose entire offense relied on scrambling with the quarterback. They're still scrambling with the quarterback, especially if you step up in the pocket and take off up the middle. If your opponent, say, only had like a 3-man rush, you can still very much do that. But again, people who were solely reliant on throwing from outside the pocket or scrambling for a ton of yards, they're going to probably have to kind of rethink their game and incorporate a lot more pocket passing because it is not a rollout game this year. And it also seems like, just as another note on rollouts, it seems like the moment you press the right trigger while you're in the pocket with your quarterback, it definitely seems like the D linemen start to disengage a lot more. So like if you start that rollout, you will almost always see that edge rusher disengage and start pursuing. And without escape artist, you really have to take a wide angle if you want to turn that corner. And so I think EA did a really great job with the pass rush and the QB contains. They may have gone a little overboard with the pass rush because right now some of the pass rush block sheds are really, really good. It's basically at the point where if you combine the improved pass rush with the improved zones, it's a very defensive game this year. There's going to be a lot less scoring than in Madden 22. You're going to have to get used to punting the ball again. There will be 10-7 games. There will be 6-3 games. There will be defensive shootouts this year. And so that's just something we're going to have to deal with after having such an offensive game in Madden 22, where if you got one stop, it was like you probably win the game. Now, despite all these awesome improvements, there's still a laundry list of improvements that the EA developers are going to have to work on for these next 2 months, and I reported as many as I could to them to hopefully have the cleanest product possible come August. But some really big ones that I reported are: number 1, RPO pump fake glitching is back. You may remember that from earlier in the year. Basically, on RPO plays, people would pump fake with the quarterback and then just kind of take off running, which is not supposed to be possible. And especially when you combine that with escape artist, it could get really toxic. Now, again, escape artist is no longer in the game, but you can still do some funky stuff with RPO pump fake glitching. And so that's one that I definitely would expect to be out of the game come August. Now, one issue I ran into the last couple of days is something we also experienced on Madden 22, which is where at random times during games, the play call menu would just freeze up and you won't be able to call a play. You won't be able to flip through any of your plays, and you have to either pause the game, call a timeout, or just watch the play clock tick all the way down to 0 and hope that your opponent declines the delay of game penalty. And that is definitely in the beta. I would say it happens even more frequently in the beta than it does in Madden 22. And so hopefully that's an issue that they will address and get out of the game completely, because it's annoying and it just really takes you out of trying to have fun in the game. And so it's just better if it gets out of the game entirely. Now, another big issue that I really haven't seen many people talking about is that my receivers seem to be whiffing on the ball a lot. And the 2 cases that I really noticed it today were I had my receiver on a corner route and he was in man coverage. And so there was a defender kind of in proximity, but I was clicking on to aggressive catch and it would play the aggressive catch animation, but he would just completely whiff on the catch. Like he would put his hands up and everything, and the ball would just fly like a foot to the right or left of his hands. And that happened several times in the same game to me. And then the game just before that, I actually threw a wheel route to my running back who was completely open, just an open field about 15 yards downfield. And I went to rat catch it, and it was a perfectly thrown ball. There were no accuracy penalties, no under pressures, anything like that. And I got just the normal in stride rack animation, and the ball either phased through my running back's hands, or again, he was maybe just like his hands were just off target by like half a foot or something. And so that's definitely an issue that they're going to have to look at. And I hope it's something that other people are reporting. And now the final thing I want to go over with you guys is what I predict will be the meta, at least at the start of Madden 23 in August. And right now, it actually looks like on the defensive side of the ball, not a whole lot is going to change. It looks like the 2-4-5 odd is still really good. It looks like $3-2-6 is really good. And it looks like 4-3 even 6-1 could still be really good. And whether you decide to go with that blanket coverage approach because all the zones play so well, or you go with that heavy blitz approach, meaning I'm only going to keep 4 or 5 guys back, but again, because the zones play so well, you can probably get away with that and forcing your opponents to get rid of the ball instantly. No matter which style you go with, 4-3 even 6-1, $3-2-6, nickel 2-4-5 odd, really will just carry over into Madden 23. Now on the offensive side of the ball, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. Now we all know that there will always be those pro players like Skimbo and probably Dubby who will always be in gun bunch or gun bunch offset no matter what year it is. They are just the masters of gun bunch. That's what they're comfortable with and familiar with. And so I would expect that some pros like them are going to always be in gun bunch. But that being said, there were some major nerfs to gun bunch this year. Now you may be familiar with those skinny running back wheel routes on plays like mesh spot, and that route made gun bunch one of the best formations in the game because basically no zone could guard that wheel route, and man coverage couldn't guard it if your opponent threw a a low ball, the defender would just glitch out and just not play it at all. And so gun bunch was one of the favorite formations of a lot of players for that wheel route. And the other reason people love gun bunch, and I talked about this in my video of why so many pro players use gun bunch, is being able to flip the play, and you could basically flip it super quick and you'll mess up your opponent's defensive adjustments. And also you could build these new route combos by, you'd have a slot receiver, you could put him on, say, a crosser, flip the play, and he goes out to a wideout spot where you couldn't naturally hot route a crosser onto that receiver without doing that gun bunch flipping the play trick. And so two big nerfs to gun bunch this year are that, number one, those wheel routes are actually guarded much better by both zones and man coverage. And number two, flipping your play now resets the whole play. So because of both of those reasons, I think that less people will be in gun bunch this year. And then a third side reason is that those skinny running back wheel routes that were previously almost exclusive to gun bunch and then just random one-off plays throughout other formations, now that's the standard hot routed running back wheel route. And so no matter what formation you're in, if you have a running back and you're in shotgun, your running back's next to you, and you put him on a wheel route, it'll be that skinny running back wheel route, not the super wide wheel route. And so people who are in gun bunch specifically for that wheel route, even if it is good by some chance in Madden 23, they can put those wheel routes on in pretty much any formation now. They don't have to be in gun bunch for that. So I definitely think there will be a decline in people using gun bunch. So we know fewer people will be in gun bunch, but the real question is, what will people be running? And the short answer is there's not really an established meta right now in the Madden 23 beta, but I do think a lot of players will shift from passing to incorporating a lot more running in their offense. With how good the pass rush is and how good the zones are playing right now, I definitely think people are going to turn to more under center formations. They're going to try and get away with a lot of halfback stretches, halfback power rows, halfback dives, try to just methodically move the ball downfield and control the clock. And then also there might be some really glitchy shotgun run plays as well. I have noticed that 0-1 traps out of shotgun formations seem to be fairly strong so far if your opponent doesn't have a gap shoot for him. What's also really interesting, and it's going to be a big shift for a lot of players, is that in Madden 22, so many offenses were based around routes that took a long time to develop. And so you think about, say, the everything bomb in gun bunch tight end, where you had that super deep post route that would beat everything if you had enough time for it to get open. And so typically players would have to find time in the pocket. They would use escape artists to roll outside the pocket and buy more time. And with the new pass rush system, there's simply not enough time for those routes to develop most of the time, unless your opponent has, say, like a 3-man rush and you're blocking a lot of extra people and you can maneuver your way in the pocket. Unless that's the case, you probably don't have time for these deep posts and these deep crossers to develop, and that's going to really change the way people play offense. I think there's going to be a lot more quick passes, a lot more people having to learn true route concepts about spacing. I know Civil has done some really good Twitter lessons where he's posting examples of how to stretch the field horizontally, and I think this year, with how fast the pass rush comes in, people are going to have to get used to taking their shorter throws, having good route concepts that are spreading those zones apart and finding soft spots in the zones, and the people who can't do that are going to really struggle passing the ball. And one last thing I'll say is that so far in the beta, I am not aware of any one-play touchdowns. And that's not to say that there aren't any one-play touchdowns or that there won't be any one-play touchdowns. I mean, I would be shocked if we have a Madden where there's no one-play touchdowns. I'd say it's almost guaranteed that come August, people will find one-play touchdowns. But that being said, between how good the zones are playing and how fast the pass rush comes in, you will see a lot fewer one-play touchdowns this year. And so that's just something that you're going to have to prepare for if that's a big staple of your game, is trying to launch those one-play touchdowns. That's going to be not nearly as frequent anymore because zones can actually cover those deep balls. And like I said before, you don't have time for them to develop anyway. If your opponent is sending a normal pass rush of, say, like, 4 players, 5 players, that pass rush is coming in there. So overall, guys, I think Madden 23 will be a great game. Who knows for sure? We will see in August. Obviously, there's still 2 months for things to change between now and then, but hopefully from everything I've laid out, it makes sense why I think it'll be a great game. I'm definitely not just saying that to make EA happy. If you guys know me, I have been absolutely blasting Madden 22 all year as one of the worst games I've ever played, and maybe that's also why I'm so happy for Madden 23, because it's just finally not Madden 22 anymore. But either way, for me, August can't come soon enough, and hopefully this video is helpful for you guys. If you have any questions about the beta, definitely leave it in the comments below, and I will answer as many as I can. Besides that, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Help me grow the second YouTube channel, and I'm going to try and be posting on here much more consistently for the rest of the summer and throughout Madden 23. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. Hope you have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next video.